And I'm Karlene, 35, a small-town girl from Vermont, who married into wealth and privilege. When I fell in love with William, I never imagined his controlling mother would force me into an impossible choice. The day I had to leave my newborn daughter behind shattered my world completely. But life has a way of coming full circle. Years later, that same precious daughter and I reunited to claim what was rightfully ours. A fortune that once seemed beyond reach. Before I share how my heart was shattered and then rebuilt, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to fight for what's rightfully yours. I grew up in a small Vermont town called Meadowbrook, the kind of place where everyone knows your name and your business. My parents owned a small hardware store that barely kept us afloat, but we were happy. I learned the value of hard work early, starting as a waitress at Lily's Diner when I was 16. By 23, I had saved enough for community college classes while still working full-time shifts serving pancakes and coffee. That's where I met William Hartford. He walked into the diner one rainy Tuesday morning in April, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that stood out among the flannel shirts and work boots of our regular customers. He sat at table 7, my section, and ordered black coffee and blueberry pancakes. "You're not from around here," I said, pouring his coffee. He smiled, revealing perfect teeth. "That obvious, huh? I'm from Connecticut. Just passing through on business." William wasn't supposed to return, but he did the next day and the day after that. Soon he was making the 2-hour drive every weekend, claiming he'd never tasted better pancakes. But we both knew it wasn't about the food. "There's something refreshing about you, Karlene," he told me on our first official date. "You're real, no pretenses, no games." I learned William came from old money, very old, very serious money. The Hartfords owned a real estate empire spanning 3 states with investments in everything from luxury hotels to technology startups. Despite his wealth, William seemed grounded. He listened when I talked about my dreams of opening a community center for kids, laughed at my jokes, and never made me feel less than. 3 months into our whirlwind romance, William took me to meet his family at their estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. The Hartford mansion was intimidating, a sprawling colonial with perfectly manicured gardens and a staff of 8. But nothing prepared me for meeting Agnes Hartford, William's mother. Agnes was tall, slender, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a tight bun. Her handshake was cool, her smile never reaching her ice blue eyes, as they assessed everything from my department store dress to my drugstore makeup. "So this is the waitress," she said to William, as if I wasn't standing right there. William squeezed my hand. "This is Karlene, mother, the woman I love." That first dinner was excruciating. Agnes questioned me about my family background, education, and future plans with the precision of an FBI interrogator. Each answer seemed to disappoint her further. When William mentioned my community center dreams, Agnes laughed lightly. "How quaint," she said. "But surely you understand William's wife will have certain social obligations. There's simply no time for hobbies." I should have seen the warning signs then, but William was so different from his mother. Warm where she was cold, generous where she was calculating. He proposed 3 weeks later, and in my love-struck state, I said yes without hesitation. Our wedding was a spectacle orchestrated entirely by Agnes. My simple dreams of a small ceremony in my hometown church were dismissed. Instead, 400 guests, most of whom I'd never met, watched me walk down the aisle of St. Thomas Episcopal Church in a designer gown that Agnes insisted upon. "A Hartford bride must look the part," she said during one of the countless fittings, examining me like a sculpture with flaws to be corrected. My parents looked uncomfortable in their new clothes, my few friends from home out of place among socialites and business moguls. William's college friends were kind, especially his best man Jackson, who whispered, "Hang in there. Once you're married, things get easier." He was wrong. After a honeymoon in the Maldives, we moved into the east wing of the Hartford estate. Agnes insisted it made sense while William was being groomed to take over more of the family business. "We'll find our own place soon," William promised, kissing my forehead. Our wing had its own entrance and kitchen, but privacy was an illusion. Agnes appeared unannounced at all hours with household matters that required immediate attention or business documents for William that couldn't wait. Despite the tension with Agnes, those first few months held moments of real happiness. William and I would sneak away for impromptu picnics or weekend drives. When we were alone, I could see the man I'd fallen in love with. Thoughtful, passionate, with dreams of modernizing his family's business while starting charitable foundations. Then I got pregnant. The 2 pink lines on the test filled me with joy and terror in equal measure. William was ecstatic, picking me up and spinning me around our bedroom. "A baby, our baby," he kept saying, his hand gently touching my still flat stomach. When we told Agnes over dinner that evening, her fork paused midway to her mouth, her expression unreadable. "How wonderful," she finally said, her tone suggesting anything but. "You've been married, 4 months? Rather quick, isn't it?" William didn't notice her disapproval too wrapped up in our news, but I felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. "The first Hartford heir in a generation," Agnes continued, regaining her composure. "We must ensure everything is done properly. I'll call Dr. Winthrop tomorrow. He's delivered babies for Hartford women for 30 years. That was the beginning of Agnes taking control. What should have been the happiest time of my life slowly transformed into something darker. William's business trips grew more frequent and longer. When I mentioned this, he explained that he needed to establish himself before the baby arrived. "I'm doing this for us, for our family," he'd say during our increasingly brief phone calls. With William gone, I was left alone with Agnes and the growing life inside me. My pregnancy was difficult from the start. Morning sickness hit me hard, lasting well into the afternoon most days. By my second trimester, I was diagnosed with gestational diabetes and anemia, requiring careful monitoring and a strict diet. Agnes used my condition to tighten her grip on my life. She scheduled all my medical appointments without consulting me selected doctors, who seemed more deferential to her than concerned about my well-being, and insisted on attending every visit. "William has entrusted me with your care in his absence," she would say whenever I objected. Dr. Winthrop, an elderly man with cold hands and few words for me, spoke primarily to Agnes during examinations. When I asked questions, he would answer briefly before turning back to my mother-in-law. "Mrs. Hartford understands our medical approach," he explained once when I pressed for more information about a medication he'd prescribed. "These matters can be quite complex for laypeople." William's absences became the norm rather than the exception. When he was home, he seemed distracted, often taking calls in another room or working late in his office. When I tried to tell him about Agnes's controlling behavior, he would kiss my forehead and say I was imagining things. "Mother just wants what's best for you and the baby. She's been through this herself, remember?" My attempts to reach William when he was away were increasingly frustrated. Calls went to voicemail, emails received brief, delayed responses. Text messages were answered hours later with apologies about meetings. One night, unable to sleep due to the baby's kicking, I discovered why. I overheard Agnes in her study speaking on the phone. "Yes, I told her you're in Chicago," she was saying. "No need to call tonight. She's been quite emotional lately. The pregnancy hormones, you know. Dr. Winthrop has suggested limiting stress. Yes, I'll tell her you send your love. MLCD ADDA Asapiden." She was intercepting our communications, controlling what William knew about my condition and what I knew about his whereabouts. As my belly grew, so did my isolation. Agnes suggested that my friends from home might carry illnesses dangerous to the baby. My parents' visits were limited to one Sunday a month, always supervised by Agnes or one of her staff. It was during this time I began to understand the true extent of the Hartford wealth. While exploring the mansion's library one afternoon, I discovered financial magazines with features on the family fortune. The Hartfords didn't just own real estate, they controlled billions in assets across multiple industries. The family had political connections reaching to the highest levels of government and influence, in everything from healthcare to education. Agnes found me reading one of these articles. "Educating yourself about the family good. You'll need to understand the legacy your child will inherit," she said, sitting across from me. "Assuming, of course, you're up to the responsibility of raising a Hartford." Her comments about my fitness as a mother became more frequent and pointed. "Hartford women have always prioritized their children over personal indulgences," she remarked when I mentioned taking art classes after the baby was born. William's grandmother maintained her figure through all 3 pregnancies. She observed while watching me struggle to eat the restrictive diet she'd arranged. "A mother's mental stability is so crucial for child development," she said casually after recounting the story of a family friend whose postpartum depression had sadly necessitated hospitalization. I began to feel watched even in my private moments. My suspicion was confirmed when I discovered a small camera hidden in a decorative vase in our bedroom. When confronted, Agnes dismissed it as a security measure. "We've had threats against the family before. It's standard in all rooms." My only ally in the household was Marta, an older housekeeper who had worked for the family for decades. She would sometimes bring me extra food when Agnes wasn't looking or sit with me when I was particularly low. Mrs. Agnes has always been protective of the family. Marta told me one afternoon while helping me fold baby clothes. She was the same way with Mr. William's first girlfriend. First girlfriend William never mentioned anyone serious before me. Marta's eyes widened, realizing she'd said too much. It was nothing. College romance. Forget I mentioned it. But I couldn't forget. When Marta left, I searched William's old room, now used as storage. In the back of his closet, I found a photo album. Inside were pictures of William with a pretty brunette I'd never seen before. They looked happy in love even. There were no names or dates. I asked William about her during his next brief visit home. Ancient history, he said dismissively. Mother never approved. Said she wasn't right for the family. What happened to her? William shrugged. She moved away. It was for the best. The ultrasound at 20 weeks brought momentary joy. We were having a girl. I lay on the examination table, tears of happiness streaming down my face as the technician pointed out perfect tiny fingers and toes. Agnes, standing in the corner, didn't share my excitement. Her expression darkened at the news. A girl, she repeated flatly. Well, there's always next time. On the drive home, she was unusually quiet. When we arrived, she went straight to her study and closed the door. I heard her on the phone again, her voice tense. Yes, it's confirmed. A girl. I know what that means. We'll handle it the same way. No, he doesn't suspect anything. Something in her tone sent a chill through me. What did having a girl mean to Agnes? And who was she talking to? That night, I felt my daughter kick particularly hard, as if she too sensed something ominous approaching. The discovery came in pieces like a disturbing puzzle slowly assembling itself. After overhearing Agnes's reaction to my baby girl, I began investigating the Hartford family history more carefully. In the mansion's enormous attic, hidden behind holiday decorations and old furniture, I found boxes of family records Agnes had never mentioned. Newspaper clippings, legal documents, old letters. They told a story very different from the polished family narrative Agnes had presented. William's father had been married before Agnes, to a woman named Catherine, who seemingly disappeared after giving birth to a daughter. The official record stated she'd abandoned her family, but letters I found from Catherine to her sister suggested she feared for her safety. Agnes watches me constantly. One letter read, Yesterday, she told me that firstborn Hartford daughters bring bad fortune, that there's a curse. She's convinced Richard, our daughter, will ruin the family business. I'm frightened, Marie. If anything happens to me... The letter ended there, torn in half. I never found the rest. Further digging revealed a pattern. Hartford men often had first marriages that ended mysteriously. Firstborn daughters were conspicuously absent from family records or listed as died in infancy. Second wives, always selected with Agnes's approval after William's father died, gave birth to sons who carried on the family name. I found a photo album of William's college years showing him with not one, but 3 different serious girlfriends, all of whom disappeared from his life after meeting his family. One newspaper clipping mentioned a woman filing a restraining order against Agnes Hartford for harassment, later dropped without explanation. Marta caught me in the attic, her face paling when she saw what I'd discovered. You shouldn't be up here, Mrs. Karlene, she whispered, glancing nervously toward the stairs. What happened to these women, Marta? To these baby girls? Marta sat heavily on an old trunk, the weight of secrets visibly pressing on her shoulders. Mrs. Agnes believes in the curse, has since she married into the family. Firstborn daughters bring financial ruin, that's what she says. When Mr. William's father's first wife had a girl. What happened to her, to the baby? The mother was institutionalized. Postpartum psychosis, they said. The baby was sent away, adopted. Mr. Richard married Mrs. Agnes 6 months later. And William doesn't know. Mr. William knows what Mrs. Agnes wants him to know, always has. The family's obsession with male heirs suddenly made terrible sense. Agnes hadn't just wanted a boy for tradition's sake. She genuinely believed a granddaughter would destroy everything the Hartfords had built. What will she do when my baby comes? I asked, my hand protectively covering my swollen belly. Marta couldn't meet my eyes. You should leave now, while you still can. But where would I go? William controlled all our money. My parents couldn't stand against the Hartford influence. And would William even believe me over his mother? I spent the next weeks gathering evidence and making contingency plans. I saved what little cash I could from the household allowance Agnes provided. I made copies of the most damning documents. I tried repeatedly to reach William to make him understand the danger, but he was always in meetings or on flights. Then a month before my due date, I found old photos of previous Hartford first wives in the locked drawer of Agnes's desk. all with the same vacant expression in their eyes. Accompanying medical records showed prescriptions for powerful antipsychotic medications. These women hadn't been crazy, they'd been drugged into submission. That same night my water broke, 4 weeks early. William was in Singapore unreachable. Agnes took control immediately, directing the household staff with military precision. I was rushed not to the hospital we'd toured, but to a private clinic I'd never seen before. The medical staff deferred to Agnes, completely ignoring my requests and questions. "Just focus on your breathing, dear," Agnes said, her voice falsely sweet as she supervised my admission. "Everything is being handled." The labor was long and difficult. Nurses came and went, administering medications without explanation. I drifted in and out of lucidity, certain at times they were giving me more than just pain relief. Through it all, Agnes remained watching with those cold blue eyes. After 18 hours, my daughter finally arrived, 6 pounds 4 ounces of perfection. The moment they placed her in my arms, a love I'd never imagined possible flooded through me. She had William's dark hair and my green eyes, tiny fingers that wrapped around my thumb with surprising strength. "Emma," I whispered the name my grandmother had carried. "My little Emma." Agnes allowed me just one night with my daughter. One night of counting tiny toes, memorizing the shape of her nose, whispering promises of protection and love. One night before she made her move. The next morning, still groggy from whatever they'd been putting in my IV, I received visitors. Agnes entered with a man in an expensive suit carrying a briefcase, followed by a doctor I hadn't seen before. "This is Mr. Blackwell, our family attorney," Agnes introduced, and Dr. Sanderson, a specialist in postpartum conditions. Mr. Blackwell opened his briefcase while Dr. Sanderson checked my vital signs with brisk efficiency. "We've prepared some papers for your consideration." Agnes continued, her voice businesslike. "Given your family history and current symptoms, we believe it's best for the baby to be placed with a more suitable family." "What family history? What symptoms?" I tried to sit up, but my body felt leaden. Dr. Sanderson made a note on his clipboard. "Agitation, confusion, paranoid ideation." "I'm not confused. I'm not signing anything." I looked around for Emma, but her bassinet was gone. "Where's my daughter?" Agnes sighed as if dealing with a difficult child. "This is exactly the instability we're concerned about. Your maternal grandmother was hospitalized for schizophrenia. You've been exhibiting increasingly erratic behavior throughout your pregnancy. The paranoid accusations, the obsessive searching through family records, the wild conspiracy theories." My heart raced as I realized how thoroughly she'd planned this. My grandmother had suffered from anxiety, not schizophrenia. But who would believe me over the Hartfords? "The choice is simple," Agnes continued, placing papers before me. "Sign voluntary termination of parental rights, allowing us to place the child with a suitable family and accept a generous settlement. Or what? Or Dr. Sanderson will be forced to recommend immediate involuntary psychiatric commitment based on your deteriorating mental state and danger to yourself and others. Once committed, you'll lose custody anyway, along with your freedom and any financial support. Mr. Blackwell has already prepared the commitment papers as well. Your choice." I looked at the doctor, desperate for an ally. "You can't do this. It's unethical." Dr. Sanderson avoided my eyes. "My assessment is based on observations and family reports. Mrs. Hartford has documented your decline thoroughly." I tried to reach for the call button, but Agnes moved it away. "The nurses are changing shifts. No one will come for at least 30 minutes. And William is unreachable in Singapore for another day." Her voice softened, almost sympathetic. "Be reasonable, Karlene. Sign the papers. Take the money. Start a new life. Fighting us will only cause you pain." "I need to call William. He wouldn't want this." "William trusts my judgment regarding family matters. He always has." To prove her point, she played a voicemail from William, "Mother just checking in. Whatever decisions need to be made about Karlene and the baby, I trust you completely. I know you'll do what's best for everyone." My last hope crumbled. Even if I fought, even if I somehow got a message to William, Agnes had already poisoned his mind against me. "If I sign," I said, my voice breaking, "what happens to Emma?" "She'll be placed with a good family. You'll have no contact, of course. Clean break is best for everyone. And if I refuse?" Agnes's smile was cold. "Then you'll be admitted to a private facility for treatment. Emma will become a ward of the family anyway. And instead of starting fresh with $5 million, you'll have nothing but a psychiatric record following you for life." I thought of Emma growing up without me either way. At least if I took the settlement, I'd have resources. I could build a life, maybe find a way back to her someday. With tears streaming down my face, I signed the papers. Each signature felt like I was cutting away a piece of my soul. "You'll never get away with this," I told Agnes as Mr. Blackwell collected the documents. "I already have, dear," Agnes replied, patting my hand. "Rest now. When you wake up, this will all feel like a bad dream." As they left, I heard Agnes instructing someone in the hallway, "Move her to the recovery suite. No visitors. And bring the child to my car in 20 minutes. I buried my face in the pillow and sobbed until darkness took me. Kawaii. I woke up alone in a luxury suite at the clinic, an envelope on the bedside table containing cashier's checks totaling $5 million and signed copies of all the documents. A nurse I hadn't seen before informed me a car was waiting to take me wherever I wanted to go. "Where's my baby?" I asked, my voice raw from crying. "I'm sorry, I don't have that information," she replied mechanically. "Your personal items are in the closet. You're free to leave whenever you're ready." Emma was gone. My daughter, my heart taken while I slept. The emptiness inside me was physical, an aching void nothing could fill. I had the driver take me back to the Hartford estate to collect my things and make one last attempt to reason with William or Agnes. The security guard stopped me at the gate. "Sorry, Mrs. Hartford, you're not on the approved list anymore." No amount of pleading changed their minds. I was nobody now, erased. I checked into a hotel and tried calling William repeatedly. When he finally answered, his voice was cold. "Mother explained everything. How could you, Karlene, agreeing to give up our daughter? Signing away your rights for money." "That's not what happened," I cried. "Agnes threatened me. She gave me no choice. Mother showed me the papers. Your signature is on every page. Because she forced me. William, she believes there's a family curse about firstborn daughters. She's done this before. Your father's first wife." "Stop it," he interrupted. "These delusions are exactly what the doctor warned us about. Mother was right to protect our daughter from you." "Our daughter? You mean you didn't give her up for adoption?" A pause. "Emma is being well cared for. That's all you need to know." Hope flickered briefly. If Emma was still with the family, maybe there was a chance I could see her again, prove myself stable and loving. "William, please, let me see her. Just once. The agreement you signed prevents any contact. It's for the best, Karlene. Take the settlement. Get the help you need." The line went dead. I called back immediately, but the number had been blocked. The next day, divorce papers were delivered to my hotel. William was dissolving our marriage on grounds of mental instability and abandonment. The settlement I'd signed waived any right to contest the divorce or seek additional support. I was 26 years old, technically a millionaire, but homeless and heartbroken beyond words. The physical pain of being separated from Emma was unbearable. My breasts ached with milk she would never drink. My arms felt empty without her weight. I would wake from brief moments of sleep, reaching for a baby who wasn't there. I rented a small apartment in Boston, far enough from the Hartford's influence, but close enough that I might somehow find a way back to Emma. The first weeks passed in a fog of grief and antidepressants, prescribed by a doctor who saw only a new mother without her child, not the full twisted story. 2 months after losing Emma, I found myself sitting on my bathroom floor at 3 a.m, staring at a bottle of sleeping pills. It would be so easy to take them all to escape the pain that followed me every waking moment. The thought of Emma stopped me. If I gave up, she would never know the truth. She would grow up believing her mother had abandoned her for money. Worse, she would be raised entirely under Agnes's influence, perhaps becoming as cold and manipulative as her grandmother. I flushed the pills and made myself a promise I would rebuild my life. I would become someone powerful enough to challenge the Hartfords. And someday, somehow, I would reunite with my daughter. The next day, I enrolled in business classes at Boston University. If money was power in the Hartford's world, then I would learn to make money. Between classes, I worked with a therapist who specialized in trauma and loss. The pain didn't disappear, but I learned to carry it differently, to use it as fuel rather than allow it to consume me. I lived frugally, investing most of my settlement with guidance from financial advisors who didn't ask too many questions about where a young woman with no family connections got $5 million. I studied successful business models, particularly those centered around services for families and children. A year into my business program, I met Sophia Zhang in an entrepreneurship seminar. Brilliant and driven with a background in technology and childhood development, she had ideas that complemented my own. "The childcare industry is broken," she said during our first serious conversation about going into business together. "Working parents need more than just babysitting. They need peace of mind, flexibility, and genuine developmental support for their children. Together, we developed a business plan for a new kind of childcare centre, one that offered extended hours, emergency care, educational programming, and real-time updates for parents through a custom app. We called it Nurture Network. Our first centre opened in a renovated Victorian house in Cambridge. I poured everything into making it perfect. Safe, stimulating, warm. Every decision, from the non-toxic paint colours to the playground equipment, was made with one question in mind. Would this be good enough for Emma? The centre filled to capacity within 3 months. Working parents, particularly single mothers, flocked to a service that understood their needs. We opened a second location in Somerville the following year, then a third in Brookline. All the while, I never stopped searching for information about Emma. I hired private investigators with instructions to be extremely discreet. The Hartford family's influence made this difficult and dangerous. Several investigators quit after receiving threats. Others found their business licenses mysteriously under review. 5 years after losing Emma, one investigator finally delivered useful information. Emma hadn't been adopted out after all. Agnes had kept her raising her as William's daughter with his new wife, a socially appropriate woman named Stephanie, who had married William less than a year after our divorce was finalised. Emma, now called Elizabeth Hartford, was being raised at the family's summer home in Newport, Rhode Island. She attended an exclusive private academy and was, according to all reports, a bright, serious child who rarely smiled. William visited on weekends. Agnes controlled every aspect of her education and social interactions. The knowledge that my daughter was so close yet completely inaccessible nearly broke me again, but it also steeled my resolve. The Hartford family was still powerful, but their business was showing signs of strain. William's leadership lacked his father's ruthless edge, and Agnes's old-fashioned approaches were becoming liabilities in a changing market. Meanwhile, Nurture Network had grown to 15 locations across New England. Sophia and I had expanded into consulting for corporate childcare programs and developed software other centres used to improve their operations. We were becoming a force in the industry, attracting attention from investors and media. I lived for the business, for the children we helped, and for the day I might see Emma again. Every night, I still looked at the single photo I had of her as a newborn, taken on my phone during those few precious hours before Agnes took her away. "I'm coming for you," I would whisper to the image of my tiny daughter. "Just hold on, Kaya." By the time Emma turned 18, Nurture Network had become a national brand with over 100 locations and a valuation exceeding $300 million. I had transformed from the naive waitress Agnes had dismissed to a CEO regularly featured in business magazines. Few knew my connection to the Hartford family. I'd legally changed my last name to my grandmother's maiden name, Bennett, and avoided publicity that might include photographs. I still received quarterly updates from my investigators about Emma's life, though I never approached her. According to reports, she was intelligent and reserved with few friends, but excellent academic performance. Agnes had limited her activities to those deemed appropriate for a Hartford. Classical, piano, equestrian, sports charity committee work. The summer after Emma's high school graduation, my office phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Ms. Bennett, my name is Elizabeth Hartford. I believe you're my biological mother." Esin. The world stopped spinning. Her voice, so adult, so controlled with the faintest echo of my own inflections, left me speechless for several seconds. "Are you there?" she asked. "Yes." I managed, gripping the desk for support. "Yes, I'm here." "Elizabeth? How did you find me?" It wasn't easy. Grandmother is thorough about erasing inconvenient history. A bitter edge sharpened her words. But she missed some things. Letters in the attic, old newspaper announcements of your marriage to my father, and when I asked our housekeeper about you, she actually cried before telling me to never mention your name again. My heart raced. After all these years, all the planning and waiting this moment had arrived unexpectedly, initiated by Emma herself. "I'd like to meet you," she continued, "if you're willing." We arranged to meet at a small cafe in Providence neutral territory, away from both our worlds. I arrived an hour early, too nervous to sit still, checking my reflection in every window I passed. Would she see herself in my features? Would she hate me for leaving her? When she walked through the door, I recognized her immediately. 18 years old, with William's dark hair and tall frame, but my green eyes and the shape of my face. She carried herself with rigid poise, scanning the room carefully before approaching my table. "Karlene Bennett," she asked formally, as if meeting a business associate. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. She sat across from me, back straight, hands folded precisely on the table. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Thank you for finding me, I said, fighting the urge to reach for her hands. I've thought about you every day since you gave me up. Her tone was neutral, her expression carefully controlled. Since I was forced to leave you, I corrected gently. There's a lot you don't know about what happened. Cam. Elizabeth's composure cracked slightly. I want to know everything. Grandmother says you abandoned me for money. Father, before he died, would never discuss you at all. William is dead. This was news to me. Car accident 2 years ago, Rhine Valley in Germany. He was there on business. A flicker of genuine grief crossed her face. He wasn't a bad father, just absent, and completely under grandmother's influence. For the next 2 hours, I told her everything. The manipulation, the threats, the impossible choice Agnes had presented. I showed her copies of the documents I'd saved newspaper clippings about other Hartford mental health incidents. The research I'd done on Agnes's pattern of eliminating inconvenient women. Elizabeth listened without interruption, her face gradually showing more emotion. Shock, anger, grief. She told me you were unstable, she finally said. That you'd agreed to give me up because you recognized you couldn't be a proper mother. Essa é what you always said. I would have done anything to keep you. Leaving you was like having my heart torn out. Why didn't you fight harder? Legal action, media exposure? The Hartford's owned judges had connections in every hospital and clinic, and Agnes made it clear that if I fought, I'd be committed somewhere I'd never get out of. At least by taking the settlement, I could build something, become someone who might eventually be able to challenge her. Elizabeth nodded slowly, a calculating look in her eyes that reminded me of William at his sharpest. The Hartford empire isn't what it was, she said. Grandmother's decisions have been increasingly erratic. She refused to modernize or diversify. The real estate market crash hit us hard, and she's alienated many of Father's best business contacts with her difficult personality. Her business assessment was surprisingly astute. I'd been tracking Hartford holdings through public records, aware they were losing ground, but hearing confirmation from inside was startling. You seem to understand the business well, I observed. I've been studying it my whole life. Not that grandmother would ever let me run anything. Hartford women manage households, not companies, she always says. Elizabeth's perfect posture slipped as she mimicked Agnes's imperious tone. What are your plans now? College? Harvard in the fall, business and economics. She hesitated. Grandmother wanted art history at Smith. We've been fighting about it for months. You won your first battle against Agnes Hartford? I'm impressed. A smile, the first real one, briefly transformed her serious face. I can be stubborn when necessary. I wonder where you got that, I said, smiling back. We parted with plans to meet again, both needing time to process our first encounter. As Elizabeth rose to leave, she paused. I've always felt like something was missing, like I was living someone else's life. Now I know why. Over the next months, we met regularly, always careful to avoid Hartford associates or locations. Elizabeth shared stories of her childhood, the strict rules, the isolation, the constant pressure to be worthy of the Hartford name. I told her about building Nurture Network, about the children and families we helped, about my dreams for the future. Slowly, cautiously, we began to form a relationship. Elizabeth was reserved, understandably wary of emotional connection after years under Agnes's influence. But beneath her careful exterior was a young woman with passion, intelligence, and a moral compass Agnes had failed to corrupt. As her departure for Harvard approached, Elizabeth made a decision that changed everything. I want to live with you, she announced during one of our meetings. Not just visit, actually live in your home. I want to know what it's like to have a real mother. Agnes would never allow it. I warned, though my heart soared at the possibility. I'm 18, legally an adult, and I have leverage. Her expression turned calculating again. There are documents in grandmother's study, tax arrangements that wouldn't withstand scrutiny, investment decisions made with insider information. I've been gathering evidence for months. Elizabeth, that's dangerous. If Agnes realizes what you're doing, I learned from the best, she cut in. Grandmother taught me how to identify and exploit weaknesses. She just never imagined I'd use those skills against her. 2 weeks later, Elizabeth moved into my Boston brownstone with 2 suitcases and a laptop containing copies of every Hartford business secret she'd managed to access. Agnes had rage, threatened, even attempted to have Elizabeth declared mentally incompetent, a familiar tactic. But Elizabeth had been thorough in her preparations, including recordings of Agnes's more unhinged moments and testimonials from staff who'd witnessed her manipulation over the years. "She's finished," Elizabeth declared as we unpacked her things. "She just doesn't know it yet." The following months were a dance of legal maneuvers and business strategy. Elizabeth legally changed her name back to Emma, severing the final symbolic tie to Agnes's control. Together, we analysed the Hartford business vulnerabilities she'd identified, looking for ethical ways to leverage our knowledge. The opportunity came when several key Hartford properties faced foreclosure due to mismanagement. Nurture Network, flush with capital from a recent round of investment, was positioned to acquire these assets at favourable terms. With Emma's insider knowledge and my business acumen, we developed a proposal that would allow us to take control of a significant portion of the Hartford empire. Agnes didn't see us coming until it was too late. The board meeting where we presented our acquisition plan was a moment I'd dreamed of for 18 years. Agnes's shock when I walked into the Hartford Group boardroom was palpable. She'd aged her once dark hair, now completely silver, her face lined with bitterness. But those cold blue eyes still burned with the same contempt. "What is she doing here?" she demanded as Emma and I took seats at the table. "Ms. Bennett represents Nurture Network," explained the family attorney. Not Mr. Blackwell, who had retired, but a younger woman with a reputation for ruthless competence. They're here to present an acquisition proposal the board is legally obligated to consider. Acquisition. This is absurd. This woman has no standing here. Emma spoke up, her voice steady. Actually, grandmother is a Hartford by birth and a significant shareholder through my trust fund. I have every right to be here. And Ms. Bennett's company is now valued at over $500 million. More than the current Hartford Group holdings. The blood drained from Agnes's face as the reality of her situation became clear. The empire she'd protected through manipulation and cruelty was slipping from her grasp, and the two women she'd tried to erase were now poised to take control. Our proposal was straightforward. Nurture Network would acquire the struggling Hartford properties, integrating them into our expanding childcare and family services business. The Hartford name would continue in a subsidiary capacity. Agnes would receive a comfortable stipend, but no management role or decision-making authority. "This is robbery," Agnes sputtered when we finished our presentation. "The board can't seriously consider this hostile takeover." "It's not hostile, Mrs. Hartford," I replied calmly. "It's salvation. Your company is 3 months from bankruptcy. Our offer is the only thing standing between you and complete financial collapse." The board voted 7-2 to accept our proposal, with only Agnes and her oldest ally opposing. As the meeting concluded, Agnes approached us, her composure finally cracking. "You planned this," she hissed down. "All these years you were plotting revenge." Emma stood tall beside me. "No, grandmother. We planned survival. Yours included, though. You don't deserve it. Everything I did was to protect this family, this legacy." "No," I said quietly. "Everything you did was to control others because of your own fears and superstitions. You tore apart families, manipulated your own son, and tried to twist Emma into a copy of yourself. But you failed." Agnes looked between us, seeing at last how similar we were. The same determined set of our jaws, the same unflinching gaze. "You'll regret this," she warned as her assistant helped her from the room. "Hartford daughters bring ruin, always have." "So," Emma took my hand, squeezing it gently. "Not anymore." The years that followed brought healing neither Emma nor I had thought possible. The pain didn't disappear. Some wounds leave permanent scars. But we built something beautiful from the broken pieces of our past. Under our joint leadership, the combined businesses thrived. We transformed former Hartford properties into affordable housing community centres and expanded Nurture Network facilities. Emma completed her degree at Harvard, then joined the company full-time, bringing fresh ideas and perspective. Agnes lived out her remaining years in a comfortable but modest cottage on what had once been Hartford land. We provided for her needs but maintained firm boundaries. She never apologised, never acknowledged the damage she'd done, but she lost the power to hurt us. The most profound healing came through our growing relationship as mother and daughter. At first, Emma remained guarded, struggling to trust after years of Agnes's manipulation. There were difficult conversations, tears, and occasional retreats into the emotional fortress she'd built for survival. "I'm afraid to need you," she confessed during one particularly raw moment. Everyone I've needed has either controlled me or disappeared. I'm not going anywhere, I promised. And I don't want to control you. I just want to love you. Slowly, through consistent presence and respect for her boundaries, the walls between us lowered. We discovered shared interests. Hiking in the White Mountains, French cinema, terrible puns that made others groan. We also found reflections of each other in unexpected ways. The same analytical approach to problems, the same nervous habit of tucking hair behind our ears when concentrating. 2 years after taking over the Hartford group, we established the New Beginnings Foundation, dedicated to helping mothers fighting unfair custody battles and supporting women escaping controlling relationships. The foundation provided legal assistance, housing, employment opportunities, and therapeutic support. Everything I had lacked when fighting Agnes. We can't change our story, Emma said at the foundation's launch, but we can change the ending for others. On Emma's 25th birthday, I gave her the only photo I had of us together, that precious image from the hospital before Agnes took her away. She studied it silently, tears spilling down her cheeks. I always wondered if you'd held me, she finally said, if you'd wanted me. Every second of every day, I told her, my own eyes filling, I never stopped wanting you, never stopped loving you, never stopped looking for a way back to you. That night, as we shared cake on my brownstone's rooftop garden, overlooking a city now dotted with buildings bearing our company logo, Emma asked the question she'd been circling for years. How did you survive it? Losing me, being powerless, starting over with nothing but pain. I considered carefully before answering. I survived by believing that love is stronger than cruelty, that truth eventually overcomes lies, that sometimes the longest path is the only one that leads home. Emma nodded, understanding in her eyes. And now, after everything Agnes took from us, now I know that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the courage to fight for love and the wisdom to use power for good. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights flicker like stars fall into earth. Mother and daughter separated by cruelty, but reunited by determination, now partners in healing, not just ourselves, but others. From that terrible day in the hospital to this peaceful moment on the rooftop stretched a journey I could never have imagined. The pain had transformed into purpose. The loss had led to recovery of something even stronger. And the love that Agnes had tried to destroy had ultimately prevailed. If you've ever faced what seemed like an impossible obstacle or had to rebuild your life from shattered pieces, I hope our story gives you courage. There is power and persistence in refusing to let others define your worth or limit your future. The path to healing isn't straight or simple, but it's always worth taking. Have you ever had to start over when everything seemed lost? Share your story in the comments below. And if this journey from heartbreak to triumph resonated with you, please subscribe and hit that like button to help others find hope in their darkest moments. Remember, sometimes the most beautiful futures rise from the most painful beginnings. Thank you for listening, and may you find the strength to reclaim whatever has been taken from you.